Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Grants Uncovered, Ask Us Anything. My name is William Simmons, and I'm a summer student here at ATB working on the entrepreneurial growth team. I'm also pleased to host today's webinar for you. I'm based out of Vancouver, and I'm curious to know where you folks are situated. Please let us know where you're joining from today by entering your city or town into the chat. Feel free to include some brief details about your business if you'd like to share that as well. As we begin today's webinar, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we gather, both in Alberta and here in British Columbia. ATB Financial operates on the traditional territories of many First Nations, including the Cree, the Dene, the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Stoney Nakoda, the Saulteaux, the Ojibwe, and the Tsuut'ina and Métis Nation of Alberta, on Treaty 6, 7, and 8 lands. We also acknowledge Treaty 4 and 10. I'm joining you today from the UBC campus, which sits on the unceded territory of the Musqueam people. Something which I first learned when I moved to BC is that much of the land is unceded, meaning it was never formally surrendered through treaties. This distinction is important as it reminds us of our duties in reconciliation. Education is a vital part of this process, and acknowledging the land is one step, but deepening our knowledge and challenging our assumptions is another. Two books that have been very helpful to me in my educational journey are Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer and The Price Paid by Bev Sellers. These works offer valuable insights into Indigenous perspectives on land, culture, and the environment. So I'm curious to know what has been impactful in your own personal learning. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce to you today's speaker and topic. Briana Blaney is the CEO and co-founder of Pocketed. Money is a leading barrier to innovation and entrepreneurship, especially for women and equity-deserving groups. As an experienced founder, Briana has lived this pain. She co-founded Pocketed to the level the playing field, helping Canadian businesses easily access over $5.9 billion annually in grants, tax credits, and incentives. Since 2021, more than 14,000 companies have used Pocketed to access over $100 million. Together with her team, Briana is on a mission to eliminate financial barriers for businesses. Joining Briana today is Jamie Proctor Boyce. As head of growth, Jamie leads sales, customer success, and operations at Pocketed. She previously built wage subsidy programs for the federal government and has worked extensively in the media, nonprofit, and startup sectors. Passionate about supporting Canadian entrepreneurs, Jamie brings creativity and compassion to whatever problem she's solving. Moderating our conversation today, we have Bontu Galataa. Bontu is an entrepreneur ecosystem strategist at ATB Financial, dedicated to supporting entrepreneurs in Alberta. Her role involves developing and nurturing strategic partnerships with small business support organizations to understand community needs, facilitating learning opportunities for entrepreneurs, and creating connections within the ecosystem. We're happy to have such esteemed experts joining us today to answer your questions about granting. Upon registration, we've been collecting questions that are top of mind for business owners, and we will be answering those questions throughout the conversation. Now, before I pass things over to our experts, a quick note for the audience. If you have any questions throughout the conversation, please enter those into the chat at any time and we'll address as many as we can. Following today's presentation, you'll receive a follow-up email within a few days with information on how you can access the recording and additional materials. Thank you, Briana, Jamie, and Bontu for sharing your time and expertise with us today. Over to you.
Awesome. William, thank you so much for having us. We're thrilled to be here. Folks, to get us started today, I think Bontu might be frozen, so I'm going to jump in and get us started. So to get us started, we're actually going to start with a quick overview of the funding landscape in Canada so that anyone who wasn't able to join our last session back earlier in the summer still has the same level set on what we're talking about today and why this topic is both so important for you as entrepreneurs, but also so near and dear to our hearts, both as entrepreneurs and experienced business folks. So again, I'm Briana Blaney. I am the CEO and co-founder of Pocketed, and William did an awesome job providing an intro. I'm thrilled to be here with Jamie, who helps to make the Pocketed world go round and bring lots of joy and money to our clients. So you are very much in good hands with having Jamie alongside me today. And we want to talk about very quickly, what do grants look like in Canada? And what is this landscape? So some of you may have joined us in our last session. We're going to try to go through this really quickly just so that we have that foundation and frankly, give everyone a chance to take a sip of your coffee, get a jolt going, and start chatting through your questions as well. So we can help to make sure you're getting the information that you need for your business today. So don't be shy, ask your questions. And as William shared, our goal is to get through as many as we can today. There is more than $5.9 billion distributed every year through grants, tax credits, and incentives. That is a lot of money. Grants and incentives are so powerful because for the most part, they're non-repayable. This is truly an injection of funds into your business, often associated with specific activities you're investing in to achieve your growth goals to help you get ahead and accelerate even faster. They're for all types of sectors. So if you're joining us today from, the software and biotech sector, from agriculture, professional services, e-commerce, brick and mortar, there is funding out there for you. And we want you to all leave here today with that message. It's not just for innovation companies. There is money out there that every sector can benefit from. And I can even speak from my own experience building a service business. That business is in the HR and recruitment space. And the year that we started using grants to help us hire more people, we grew more than 500% in 1 year, because all of a sudden, grants allowed us to de-risk investments in our business. And I share that story because I think it's powerful to understand the impact they can have for all of you and your businesses as well. And we're happy to answer questions and again, share more examples throughout. Today, there is more than 1,800 programs open in Canada. These are programs from the federal government, from provincial governments, municipalities, private sources, you name it. There is a lot of money out there. It's important to understand this because yes, there's $5.9 billion, but this factor, the sheer volume of programs that are open, is part of why grants are so challenging. So if you've ever found yourself feeling overwhelmed by grants, unsure of where to find them, to determine the ones that are a good fit for your business, you're not alone. And also, I want to validate that for you. They are hard, they are confusing, and you can end up on page 97 of Google trying to figure it out. And that is why we built Pocketed. So it was centralized all of this information in one place for you. So when you create your account in our software, which will offer you a free code for today, courtesy of ATB Financial, but when you make your free account in Pocketed, you're going to be automatically matched with all of your eligible funding programs and can know with confidence that Pocketed has the most comprehensive database in the country. So you are seeing the programs that you are eligible to access, and that should give you some peace of mind. But there are a ton of programs, so many. So when should you be starting to think about grants as part of your funding strategy? Well, if you are incorporated or registered, it doesn't have to be in a corporation, you have some access to capital, which I'm going to unpack in a moment because it's kind of counterintuitive, and either have employees on payroll or a willingness to add employees to payroll. This is really your baseline for being what we call grant ready. And the inevitable question some of you are probably wondering is, if I don't meet some of these criteria, can I still access grants? And the answer is yes. If you are unincorporated, you can still access some funding, or unregistered, you can access some funding. It's just less. So the average company that is registered in the Pocketed platform as an incorporated business matches with 77 programs. Those who are not a registered business or incorporated match with 17. So there are some, just quite a bit less, and certain activities will be most funded by those programs. The access to capital one is challenging, and again, counterintuitive. But why this matters is that most grants in Canada work on either a reimbursement or a matching structure, which means that you are spending some money on that activity, and the government is either paying you back for those dollars that you spent, or they're co-investing in that activity with you. You might put in $1, they might put in $1. So you do need to have some access to funds. And why this matters is that if you have, for example, revenue of $100,000, or you only spend about $100,000 in a year, it probably doesn't make sense to be pursuing a multi-million-dollar program. You likely don't have the financial resources to successfully win or use that program. So it is an important factor. And also employees. This is not a requirement so much as it just unlocks more programs for you. Those of you in priority industries, so clean tech, agriculture, life sciences, places that we see our government dedicating additional financial resources, are going to be particularly excited about grants because there are a lot of funds being dedicated to these industries, segments, and activities. If there's ESG focus in any of your initiatives, anything clean tech oriented, you are building anything in that space, there is money both through tax credits and grants that you're able to access, which is very powerful. And then finally, the baseline that we really consider exciting is you're growing and evolving. That could mean that you're hiring, you're expanding, you're digitizing, you're researching, you're doing something that is more than business as usual, because ultimately it's all about fundable activities. And that's how grants are structured. The government wants to co-invest with you and support you in investing in activities that create benefits to Canada, whether it's creating jobs for the economy through hiring, doing research and development to improve innovation in the country, upskilling the workforce with training, improving sustainability either through your actual business or the new equipment that you're installing or whatever it may be, that's a big focus. Purchasing equipment, we want to see more of that happening in Canada. So we're domesticating things like manufacturing. And then exporting and market expansion. So the government is very focused on spending money in these categories. We're often asked what is not fundable. And while this is not an absolute list, there is some flexibility here. Generally speaking, things like business as usual is not fundable. That's your routine operational expenses. Marketing and advertising, also a tough category to gain funding in. And we'll happily answer questions about that because there's some creative workarounds there. Your founder salary, so your own income as a founder, as a business owner, tough to fund. Family and friends, also difficult, or existing employees. It's a lot of net new is what the government's looking to fund. General business maintenance, debt repayment, personal expenses, and buying a business. Those activities are generally not fundable. So that, I think, provides at least a high-level overview of what you should be looking at. And in terms of why it's so important to understand the activities that you're looking to invest in, again, we shared that there's over 1,800 programs open right now. On average, you might match with 3. And from those 3, from those 173, rather, you might only be eligible to pursue 3 that make sense for those activities you're investing in your business. So it's important to understand how that framework works so that you're not spending a lot of time chasing programs that aren't a good fit because you're busy. You're founders, you're running a business, you're building, you're growing, and it's hard. And we don't want grants to be any harder than they need to be. So spending the time to understand where do you need to invest to achieve your growth goals, and then finding funding programs that align with those activities, that's going to save you a lot of time and energy and ultimately increase your success rate. If you are interested, and William can drop a link in the chat, we do have a free resource that you can use to help you build out your funding roadmap. It's going to prompt you through lots of questions and just get through that process of thinking about your activities and your projects and how you need to grow, and match that with funding programs using your Pocketed account, which again, you're going to have for free, courtesy of ATB Financial. For those of you who are less familiar with Pocketed, we are a software platform. There's a few ways that we support in the grant world, and it's very modular. You can use what you need at the time that you need it, and you may find that what you need is different at different stages. And the first piece that's relevant for everyone is our software. It's, again, free for you to use with your code, and we encourage you to be using it. And it provides you a self-serve tool to quickly identify those eligible programs and then use that critical thinking and things like that funding roadmap tool to determine the ones that are relevant for your business. We also do offer services, both having a grant specialist do that planning for you through our concierge product, as well as grant writing for any program that you might want to pursue, particularly if you feel like you don't have the capacity or the expertise to do it yourself. Now, Bontu, I'm going to end there because I want to make sure we have most of our time today to answer questions. But folks, hopefully that provides you with enough of a baseline in terms of the funding landscape that you feel comfortable asking your questions and both probing and poking away and whatever might be relevant for your business today. Oh, Bontu, I think you're muted.
All right, all of the tech issues happening all at the beginning. So hopefully it'll be smooth sailing after this. All right, but thank you, Briana. That was a really great overview of our last session from June. It's great to have those criterias up front, knowing when to actually apply for a grant and knowing when it's applicable to actually spend the time in an application as well. So thank you for providing that. There are, and again, to the viewers, please be specific with your questions if you need to be, if it is relevant for you. I'm sure somebody, on the call will also appreciate that. So feel free to pop your questions in. And I'll start off with a question from Dorothy here, and I'll also just add in a question from our previous session because I think they're very similar. So Dorothy asks, can I access grants for startup incorporated? So I'm assuming a startup that's already incorporated. And then the other question is for startup businesses, or are there grants available for anyone that has a business that they've registered within a year? So they've only been in business for about a year. Is there limitations to that?
Jim, you want to jump in?
Absolutely. Hi, folks. So great to be here with you today. Absolutely. The reality is that, yes, there are some grants for folks who are newly incorporated. It's a great call out because the government does like to see a certain amount of traction for more grants and bigger grants. So being incorporated for a year or 2 or 3 are all milestones that we regularly see for bigger grants, having certain revenue thresholds, having certain headcounts. But I personally am very passionate about hiring grants, and these are a great category of funding that you can access right away. So it's less about how old your business is or how much money you're making. If your business is brand new, but you are ready to create a job for another person, there's absolutely wage subsidies out there to help you bring people onto your team. There are other categories of grants that you can absolutely access when you are newer or earlier in your journey, and these are absolutely things that you can find in our Pocketed software.
Awesome, thank you, Jamie.
Can I actually share an example? Because I think it's
Yeah.
helpful. So, Dorothy, we've used grants since Pocketed was an idea, and I think that's important for every founder here to hear, because we had no money. We were really early. We'd actually already been incorporated because we built Pocketed in the shell of a previous startup that we built and shut down. And so we built it in that incorporation shell, which is like a pro tip because it gets you past some of those incorporation thresholds. But we used funding from the first idea of Pocketed and did it through those wage subsidies Jamie's referencing. So the answer is absolutely yes, you can and should be accessing funding from the very early stages of your business. Just be pragmatic about what you're going to access. You're probably not getting that multi-million-dollar grant that looks really exciting and you hope is going to give you cash that you can use to build your business, in part because that's just not how grants work. And that is, I think, going to be something that's a key theme today, is that there really are no grants that are going to give you a pool of like fun money that you can go and spend and build with. The exception to that is occasionally certain accelerators will offer grants like that just give you $25,000, for example, and you aren't having to report back on how you spent that money. Those are such a gift. And we were able to benefit from a couple of those early on, but that's really unusual. So for the most part, it is really tied to an activity that you're doing in your business. And at Pocketed, when we built from zero to an MVP and shipped into customers' hands in 14 weeks, we did that sprint with interns that were fully funded by the government. So yes, we did have to have our own money and we did put in some founder money, about $50,000. But for every dollar we put into the business ourselves, we got at least $4 in government funding. So you can make it rain for yourself by strategically using grants and then using more grants and more grants. And that's a creative way of doing it from your earliest stages in building your business.
That's great advice. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing your own personal journey as well. Because it's the strategy, and that's I think where the additional support from Pocketed comes in as well. Is you can write the applications and you can do it on your own, but if you're not being very strategic about them, then it might be you might be losing out on the actual grants that you could qualify for. So thank you for that. All right, well, let's go to the next question. And I believe it's Chinwe that asks, are there grants available for a nonprofit tech startup in the first year of setup? So I guess maybe also just to add to that, for nonprofits, are there grants that are available that they can leverage as well?
Yeah, nonprofits are in this beautiful sweet spot. And I'll actually ask Jamie to share an example of a nonprofit that we helped secure an almost $500,000 grant. Super exciting in this kind of use case. But absolutely, nonprofits are as eligible for government funding and additional other pools of funding through family foundations and corporations and nonprofit specific grants. So the answer, Chinwe, is absolutely. There certainly are. It really comes down to what are you building? Who are you building it for? And more importantly, how are you spending money on a day-to-day basis to build it? Because you're not really going to get, generally, this grant that Jamie's going to share an example of is actually an exception. But generally speaking, it's hard to find grants that are just going to give you $100,000 to go and build a software platform. But they may give you $50,000 to subsidize wages of a developer to help you build your platform. So it does require you to think through the project, but the activities you're doing within that project to then build it. And you're going to probably get so sick of hearing me and Jamie talk about that today, but it's such a critical thing to learn and understand is those fundable activities, because it determines so much of your eligibility and which programs make sense to pursue. Jamie, Passing over to Jamie,
Yeah.
I think that one example is just so powerful for this specific question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really can't underscore what Briana said enough. It's absolutely, you need to be an organization to go after grants, but really each grant application is about what is your project. And with for-profit grants, the driver that most funders care about is economic development. Whereas with nonprofit grants, the driver that most programs talk about is how are we making our communities healthier, safer, how are we improving the social determinants of health? And so we work with an amazing company who we first worked with as a for-profit technology company. They did web design and IT for other companies, and then they started building a tool that actually helps unhoused folks gain financial literacy as well as supplies and food for their pets. So it's approaching things from all different angles, working with all different communities. It's both services and technology, and we help them win $450,000 from the Red Cross and the Communities Recovery Program. And that money was used to hire software developers, but also to hire community liaisons who were going out to work with the folks on the ground that were needing the different supports that this tool offered. So really cool story, a big win for their organization, a huge win for Pocketed, and then a brilliant serial founder. But again, she was a tech company, really, that had a nonprofit spin out. And because the impact on unhoused people, on pets, on improving the lives of people through financial literacy intervention, those were the activities that the grant application cared about and awarded her that large sum of money based on.
Awesome. That's really great. And while we're, I guess, on that topic, next question also follows up on, like, when do you know when you're grant ready? Like, I think Briana went through a bit of a checklist, but can you dive a little bit deeper into like actually knowing when you're ready, when you spend time and actually going in and researching grants that are available for your specific business or nonprofit?
Absolutely. First of all, you should be looking from the moment you have your idea, especially if you're not yet registered. If you're really being creative about how funding can impact your business, it should be an input in where you choose to register your business, because not every province is created equally overall, but especially in certain subsectors. So get a handle on where there is different funding for the type of business that you're looking to build that cares about what you're building in the prairies and the Maritimes. Bizarrely, I still find it bizarre that this is true, but they care a lot about agriculture in the Maritimes, which surprises me. And Jamie teases me about that because I'm always floored by it, but I'm surprised. And other provinces care about different things. So take a look at where money is available for the type of business that you're building. And that should and could be a beneficial input for you in decision making alongside your accountant and your lawyer. Don't just make that decision based on grants, but of where you choose to register. So that is something that we encourage people to do really, really early. But again, those fundamental questions, and you're going to see these in the funding roadmap tool, which we'll put back in the chat again so you can conveniently access it. But there are 5 questions. Is your business incorporated? Are you currently generating revenue? How much revenue did you generate in the last 12 months? Be really honest, because if it was under 100 grand, you're still eligible for some, but less. If it was over 100 million, you've sized out of grants. So being honest with yourself about your current state. Question 4, do you have or are you hiring employees on payroll? If yes, tons of money, over $1 billion a year is distributed every year in hiring grants valued at $25,000 or less. There's a lot of funding programs available for you if you're hiring. And then do you have access to capital? Because if you don't have any money, you cannot invest yourself. If you're not making money, you can reinvest. If you have no money, you're going to have a really hard time with grants because they require you to have some skin in the game. And that is, again, counterintuitive and challenging, but very, very real. So those are the 5 questions that we encourage you to ask yourself to say, does it make sense for me to be doing this and actually putting some time and energy into it?
That's great advice. And a great just checklist as well, because I think it's a matter of just answering those as a yes or no, and very simple to go through and figure out where you're at with your business or nonprofit. So thank you for that. And then I'm just going to quickly go to a question that was previously submitted, and it aligns with sort of the hiring and training staff. And maybe, I don't know if you know this from top of mind, but are there grants that are available for staff training, and building improvements.
Yeah, those are two separate things. But yes, Jamie, you want to tackle the staff training piece?
Yeah, absolutely. And I see that Natoya is also asking about a specific type of training for themselves. The short answer is yes. In fact, it's our federal government that does a transfer to each of the provinces, and then each province has unique training programs, training grants that fund training programs. Now, the grant writer intel on these is that in some provinces, the grant is just for employees. So a founder, a sole proprietor, a co-owner of a company cannot access these. The great news is that in Alberta, business owners, if you have 4 or fewer staff, can also leverage this training grant for themselves. It's up to $15,000. The percentage that the province contributes differs based on who's receiving the grant, but up to $15,000 is out there for employees, future employees. So if you would like to hire someone, but they don't quite have a credential that they need for their job, you can help them go through a training through this grant. And all you need to be, you need to do a couple things in the application, but one of the things you'll do in the application is express your intention to hire them after they get this training. It's a big priority of our government to make sure that the Canadian workforce is skilled, right? And with the digitization of our world, there's so many new skills that we all need to learn and become proficient in. That's why the government is investing in this, right? It helps you get training, it helps your employees get training, but it also makes it so that across the country, our workforce is competitive. And that's something that helps all of us.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then capital expenditure, I'll pass it back to Briana because there's absolutely funding for that.
Yeah, certainly. And Jamie may jump in to provide more context, but the building improvement piece, yes. And every province has different programs, and the purpose around those improvements sometimes dictates which programs you can pursue. Many of those programs have minimum sizes, so they tend to be larger projects that you're tackling in your business and require what's called co-investment. So they are matching programs. They aren't going to subsidize the full percentage or the full cost of those improvements. You're going to have to foot some of that bill as well. So it may be projects to retrofit a building to be more accessible to persons with disabilities. It may be about greening a building, introducing new sustainable technologies in your building. It's a lot of implementation. But absolutely, there is a substantial amount of funding across the board as it relates to building improvements and equipment purchases. So both of those things. And if you're, a business that happens to produce solar panels, there is tax credits that you can get 30% of every dollar you spend back on purchasing multi-million-dollar equipment. So it's cash back in your pocket, and just for doing something you had to do anyway, which is really exciting. So that's part of why looking at grants proactively is really important, because you may find that based on activities you don't have a choice about doing that you have to do, you can access and benefit from different funding programs. And that may be grants or maybe tax credits, and they do work quite differently. So be aware of them. Grants do require you to apply in advance of doing the activity and get approved before you spend money on that project or activity, whereas tax credits tend to be retroactive. So you're entitled to them as long as you spent money on that eligible activity and submit in their required timelines. So 2 different structures for grants and tax credits.
Perfect.
I think we got through that full question, Bontu. I'm seeing tons of them around hiring as well. There's always so many questions about hiring.
Exactly. And maybe just, is there, so with, when the viewers go into Pocketed, will they be able to see which grants are specific to like the hiring piece as well? Like, is that something
Totally.
that like your team provides? Yeah.
Yeah, directly in our software platform, you'll see all of your programs, and then you can, of course, filter by grants that are going to subsidize hiring, grants that fund capital expenditures, research and development. So you can absolutely use our software to help you narrow it down to the programs that fund the thing you're looking to fund.
Perfect. That's always great. That simplifies the process. So that's really good to know. And maybe next one, anything that you know of that is specific to mental health care businesses, like grants that are available for newly established businesses in those areas?
I'm going to jump on my soapbox for 5 seconds, and I'll hand over to Jamie to add to it. Grants fund projects and activities, not businesses. So why this matters is that being a woman-owned business doesn't entitle you to anything. Being a mental health business doesn't entitle you to anything. It's what are you spending money on to build your mental health business? Those activities are the things that are fundable, not the business as a whole. So it's a really, really critical reframe, and we're being really direct on it and a little bit intense and a little bit harsh because it's so important. And if you're looking for grants for a mental health business, you're going to be so disappointed. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to be disappointed, and you're not going to find anything that's a fit. But when you instead reframe it as, okay, I'm building a mental health business, I know that I need to invest in new marketing technology so people can purchase something directly on my website. That is a fundable activity. That project is fundable. So you want to reframe that not as the business, but the projects and the activities in your business that you're doing to build it. Jamie, is there anything you want to add? Because I know we've supported so many companies
Absolutely.
in this space. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you, Lucia, for your great work. I mean, we all need to be, I was actually at a roundtable last night about entrepreneurship and mental health, and it's real, right? It's real for everyone. And it's also really real for those folks who are taking risks and building businesses. So thank you for supporting your community. This is tricky in the sense that Briana's right, particularly on the for-profit side. You are a business. The grants care about, are you creating jobs? Are you training the workforce? Are you doing research and development? Are you building something innovative? If you're looking for funding to support mental health programming, there are grants for that, but they go to nonprofits. That's like a hard truth. How do you access that? Well, you partner with a nonprofit, or you have a nonprofit side. So there's absolutely grants out there to help build mental health programming, to do pilots with new communities, to help subsidize the cost of therapy for certain communities. But I've never seen one go to a for-profit entity. The lead applicant for that grant and the person managing the money from that grant needs to be a nonprofit or a charity. Nonprofit funding cares about the social determinants of health. For-profit funding cares about economic development.
That's awesome. And to be quite a lot of collaborations with nonprofit as well as for-profit organizations, just specifically for that reason. So that's great advice there as well. And I think that your responses also answer, I believe it's Narissa's question around, grants specifically for a small women-owned business. So not necessarily.
I'm going to add a data point that I think is interesting for Narissa. I'm going to add one data point, Bontu, that I think is interesting for Narissa, and this is relevant for us because we get asked this question a lot. We're a woman-owned business as well. And the tough truth is that we know that less than 3% of venture funding goes to women-owned businesses, but less than 2% of grants are just for women-owned businesses. So it's actually worse. And why that's important to understand is that it's arguably the wrong perspective and framing. So we often offer a reframe, which is, as a women-owned business, 2% of grants are just for you, and you can access the other 98% of programs that are also available. So 100% of grants are for you, 98% are for your male counterparts. And as a woman-owned business, as a person of color, as any equity deserving community, you often have priority access to programs. Not all, but many. And that is an important reframe. So I would argue, have a really awesome opportunity here to be capitalizing on programs. But as we often frame it, don't limit yourself to the women money because it's less than 2% of total programs. Make sure you're going after all of it.
And if I can, I'll just jump in to say that everything that Briana is saying is totally true. Lots of these government programs might prioritize certain groups as applicants. Another category of funding that we often talk about are corporate competitions. These are another example of programs that actually really do prioritize groups from different communities. So there's lots of money out there from the banks, from the credit cards, small infusions of cash for women-owned entrepreneurs. Visa, She's Next. BMO has one. MasterCard has one. Currently, right now, TELUS has their Stand With Owners grant. The packages that you can win from that are up to $250,000 between $50,000 in cash, mentorship, being featured in TELUS ads. They're super competitive competitions, but we also know that they really prioritize diversity in their awardees. And so it doesn't ever hurt to throw your hat into the ring. And that's also a really perfect example of how to engage with a pocketed grant writer in like a low touch way. They are excellent writers. They're like journalists. They're going to interview you. They're going to understand your passion. They're going to understand your differentiator as a business. And they're going to make a beautiful write-up for you to submit to this corporate competition. You'll pay us one time, but it's okay with us if you take that same write-up and apply to 4 other corporate competitions. So really, if you're looking for professional writing help for some of these really competitive calls, do it once with Pocketed and then go paper the town with your awesome story.
Yeah. Bontu, I'm going to jump in because I saw one question around the structure of how Pocketed works. Somebody was asking how Pocketed works and how do our fee structures work.
Sure.
And Jamie just started talking about it. So I think it's relevant to address right now. Pocketed software through the code William shared with you is going to be totally free for you to access. So that's a benefit that you have through ATB Financial. It's also important to understand that services, including grant writing, consulting with humans, having a grant strategy, having someone use the tool for you, those are paid. We cannot offer those to you for free because we're also a small business and a startup and we need to make money too. And that is part of how we do that. So we offer you support to do a grant writing project whenever possible. We love to work with you on a success basis. So if you are successful in the application, only then does Pocketed get paid. We are legally not allowed to do that for certain programs. The rules of the program prohibit that structure. So for other programs, we charge project fees or hybrid fees where it's a combo of some small deposits. So there's shared skin in the game and accountability to the process, where the bulk of the fee, where possible, still do on success. So it really does depend. Competitions like Jamie was just talking about, those are exclusively offered as a project fee. We cannot and do not offer those on success. They don't tend to be particularly expensive, but they do require an investment from you upfront.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And I believe the next question here also might be a bit of a follow-up, but it's around, are there specific job/roles that we can get a hiring grant? But I'm assuming it's like, is there maybe like a grant available for hiring a grant writer? That's how it is.
Yeah, no. That would be awesome. But no, certain grants actually do allow you to cover some overhead, like at administration.
Okay.
So some grants will allow you to have a small piece of it. Those tend to be huge grants. So you're often a later stage business or doing it in partnership with another organization to get those big grants. So sometimes there's like an overhead category you can slide it into, but no, you are paying those not from the grant money. And that is important to understand. The grant money is going to those eligible activities, and us writing an application for you is not one of them. But I think this role, Gazansfar, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And if not, please do chat your pronunciation because I think it does matter. But ultimately, there's lots of different types of roles that grants fund. Jamie is our resident hiring grant expert. She actually came out of building hiring grant programs. Jamie, do you want to talk about kind of those key categories of hiring grants?
Absolutely. So with all grants, we are always asking about eligibility. So with all grants, we need to make sure that your organization meets whatever the key eligibility is, and then the project that you're putting forward is eligible. With hiring grants, the project is the job description, right? It's the role. And then there's a third layer of eligibility, which is that the candidate, the person you're hiring, has to be eligible. Therefore, we break down hiring grants based on those candidate profiles. So the 5 key types of candidates that are widely eligible, there are more than this, but the 5 big categories are students. So folks that are currently enrolled in a Canadian post-secondary, pursuing a certificate, degree, diploma. So all levels, you can have an undergrad, someone getting an associate's degree, someone going back to school just for a certificate. There's no age limit for students. So it's really important to remember. People always think, oh, it's just someone who's 18, though 18-year-old digital native interns make incredible impacts in many organizations. So don't count them out. But a student could also be someone going back to school for a master's. It could be a PhD student. So anyone who's currently in school, students are a big category. The next category does have an age limit. We call it youth. So it's folks that are 30 years or younger. Most of the grants are funding folks that are 15 to 30, 19 to 30. And so if you are ready to hire somebody that's newer to the workforce, the government is happy to co-invest in that with you. Next category would be folks who are unemployed. So folks who have been recently unemployed or have been working fewer hours than they need, folks who have been freelancing and are ready to go back to a salaried position. Unemployed folks are often fundable depending on your province. Academic collaboration. So if you want to work with a post-secondary on a research or innovation project, folks that, again, are students or are new grads from those schools can be hired. And newcomers, folks that have achieved permanent residence or Canadian citizenship in the last 5 years. Those programs we tend to see really industry focused. So for example, we need more folks joining the environmental sector. So if you are an environmental engineer that was trained in another country and you've immigrated to Canada, there could be a subsidy for you. So students, youth, unemployed folks, academic collaborations, and newcomers are the key types of candidates that widely get wage subsidies.
Bontu, is it okay if I jump in and ask Jamie some follow-up questions? I've seen some questions come in that are just more specific about hiring grants. So Jamie, I'll pose these over to you. Someone's asking about, everyone's favorite question, which is, are there student grants for international students? Because I think that's like the most important baseline to understand about hiring grants.
Yeah, it is. And I was even at this roundtable last night. It came up as well for newcomers that haven't achieved PR or citizenship, folks that are still here on a work permit. They're largely not fundable. In my, I think, 8 years of working in grants, I've seen one program that allowed folks who hadn't yet achieved PR to be funded. And so the reality is that the government doesn't have a clear mechanism to reinvest our taxpayer dollars through grant programs into folks that are potentially only here temporarily. But for folks that have achieved PR or citizenship, there are lots of grants. So with those student programs, they are not for international students. We do know that there are a few universities that have stipends for international folks if they're at that specific school. But unfortunately, I'm not aware of one in Alberta yet. But hopefully they'll be listening to some of these BC schools. But far and away, people need to be able to prove, in fact, that they're permanent residents or Canadian citizens in order to gain a hiring grant.
Another question was around, I'm creating jobs, offering services, and I need payroll for employees, expanding as healthcare demand increases. Are there funds for that? So, Malene, I think the question is really just, are there subsidies that help you, are there grants that help you subsidize wages? And the answer is absolutely. In those 5 categories that Jamie articulated of candidate profiles, absolutely. So that does exclude a significant chunk of the workforce, which I think is an important call out. There are gaps in grant funding and how it's structured. This is one. That mid-market workforce is one. So yes, if you're hiring with candidates within those 5 core profiles that are most fundable. I think, Jamie, that captured all of the hiring grant. Oh, how can we commit to hire people and spend money without having confirmed and approved grants? Sneha, it's a really great question. And I'm going to actually share with you how we got around it in our early days. They're generally speaking, when we work with companies on their hiring grants, are 2 categories. I need the money or I cannot hire, or I want the money, but I have to hire either way. So if you are in the category where we have been for a lot of our journey, which is I need the money or I literally cannot hire you, we tend to make conditional offers. So in that process, we're assessing whether that candidate could be eligible for hiring grants. In some cases, if we literally couldn't hire without it, we're making sure we only are moving forward candidates that are eligible. And we'll make our offer contingent on being approved for a hiring grant. And that is a great note and a great question, and supports another question that I saw on how quickly do you receive the money, because you, generally speaking, are getting approved 3 weeks to a few months before that person's going to start working. And that is what makes hiring grants difficult, is the cycles that they work on. Student grants, for example, work on semesters. But what we know is that in June, you were hiring and getting approved for funding for your student that would start working in September. So the lead time is really, really long. And we would always make our offers contingent on being approved for a hiring grant. And that is something that may help you as well, Sneha, is making your offers conditional and being just really transparent with that candidate that you are early stage or you are a small business and there does need to be this subsidy in order for you to be able to move forward with their role. And we have found that helpful for us, and have indeed had to not move forward with hiring candidates. We didn't get approved for funding. So we've been there. Oh, and Sneha's question was, how quickly do I actually get the money after being approved? Great question, Sneha. Depends entirely on the program. If we use the example of hiring grants, because we're already talking about them, certain hiring grants are going to give you a portion of the money upfront before that person even starts working. those are the best because when you're early stage and cash is tight, it gives you some cash to then pay payroll with. But most are going to reimburse you after you spend money on payroll. So you're going to submit your pay stubs in the monthly or quarterly or midterm, end of term for the hiring grant period cycle, whatever that grant requires. You'll see that information on Pocketed. And then you're going to be reimbursed generally within 30 days of submitting your reporting. So you do have that reporting obligation, proving that you spent the money that you said you would on the thing you said you would spend it on, then you get reimbursed. Oh, and others are longer, Jamie. We have some examples right now of applications that were submitted a year ago for large multi-million-dollar grants that were over a year to be approved by the funder. And that's just to get approved and sign a funding agreement. And then the money will be spent by that company and they will submit quarterly for reimbursements of that money. So it can be a long window depending on the program that you're pursuing.
Yeah, it's true. I see that Elite is asking about, are there grants for businesses in the arts and creative field? Answer is yes. But I just was working on a project with one of these as an example. The art and creative field, it's a performance company, and it encourages the grant application 5 months in advance of the project starting. So timelines really matter for grant applications. And as Briana said, with grants, you typically need to get approved before the project starts versus tax credits where you can do the work. And then with your tax return, we can help you prepare the submissions to claim that entitlement for something that you've already spent. So with grants, you do need to get permission, if you will, approval, and then you can start spending. But I think another takeaway from this piece of the conversation is that there's a ton of grants, right? Remember, there's 1,800 open today, and they're each subtly different, which is why we built Pocketed. You can use this software platform that we're sharing with everyone for free to go in and learn more about these programs, to target your projects and see what matches up with both the project I want to do and the timeline on which I want to do that project. And Pocketed software will help you with that.
Awesome. Thank you both for providing that additional context, because that does help quite a bit. And maybe just as a follow-up, and this is just from follow-up from previous webinar that I had, and as well as the summary that Briana provided earlier. Like, is there a strategy on maybe, like, if there's a grant that's coming up, it's a very short period of time, like, should you have certain things just ready to go for a grant? Like, I know they're going to be different for each application, but are there, like, maybe just general information that you should just have ready to go, so that if the window for applying for the grant is very short, that you can customize some parts of it, but then other parts are ready to go? Any suggestions or recommendations on that?
So totally. So there's definitely the baseline. Have your business information ready. So what I mean by that is things like your incorporation date. Oftentimes you have to submit incorporation paperwork or registration paperwork, your mailing address. You can have like a business information document. Always, you're going to have to submit a boilerplate on what your business is, a description of your company. That's just a fundamental requirement. But the other parts, Bontu, are so program and application specific. So most of them are going to have extensive long form requirements for you to submit. If you're doing training grants, it's often a job description, an onboarding plan, or a learning and development plan for your intern, for your employee. And then for other grants, it is so varied. Some of them are going to have 10 questions that are long form. Many are going to require financial statements and or financial projections, particularly when you're pursuing large grants, an export plan if you're pursuing export funding. So it really varies depending on the program, which makes it hard to prepare. For any of you that are looking at that going, holy smokes, that's overwhelming. What do I even do with that? The good news for you is that we have built a new Pocketed software tool that you will gain access to before the end of this year that is going to do a lot of that heavy lifting for you. So based on information that you share, it's going to help craft those answers for you in an automated way, which is particularly valuable if you're early stage and not at the place yet where you can justify the expense of hiring a grant writer. It does require critical thought. You still have to use your own judgment before you use any of the content, but it's going to do a lot of that lift for you using AI.
Amazing. That's awesome. Perfect. And then I'll just move over to this question from Barbara here that says, as a company that works with individuals from marginalized communities and wanting to create a training program employment possibilities, but at the same time needing to move into a bigger space and not having many funds available, what advice in getting a bank loan / line of credit, if happen to be, I guess if it's a fund matching program, what advice do you have around going out and getting a loan or a line of credit in order to be able to be eligible for that grant? What advice do you have?
Yeah. Well, first of all, talk to your banker, talk to your folks at ATB Financial for sure, see how they can support you. But a lot of the time, if you're applying for bigger programs, you're going to be required to show proof of funds in some way. And oftentimes providing a letter of proof that you can access the funding if you are approved through things like a line of credit or any other form of debt is sufficient for the funders. That is an option. I don't know whether or not that's something ATB does, but there are certain funders that exist in the grant funding ecosystem that we can make intros for you to as well that can help you with that. But I would always start with your bank, because if you can get it through your bank, you're going to get better rates. You already have a relationship, start there. Use those secondary lenders always as like a last resort because they're expensive. So yes, and Barbara, I would suggest you need to ask whether that's the right way to fund it, or if going through ATB or any other collaboration of other loans meant for business owners is going to be a better channel for you. And then finding other grants that will subsidize other activities. The other way to think about it is maybe you need to redirect all of your money into that new building. So let's look at what of your other costs in that you have can we help to offset with grants, even if it's not that specific cost. So maybe that you can't get a grant for that, but there's grants you can get for other things that you do operationally that we can help you offset so you have more cash to invest in that building. So I'd say traditional banker always is your first line of defense as it relates to accessing any sort of debt and then getting more creative from there. And of course, our team is available and happy to support with introductions as required.
Awesome. Perfect. Yes. I recommend speak to your banker before you go out and get other lending.
Seriously.
Yeah. Perfect. Am I okay? Am I frozen? Can you guys hear me?
We can see you. Yep, we can see you.
Perfect.
I'm just looking here at the questions, and I know we only have a few minutes left. So I'm wondering
Come
if
on.
there's a way that we can get through this quickly, because some of them are like quick ones. So like Chinwei's question around, I've got a for-profit and a nonprofit. Chinwei, the answer to that is you're really restricted in changing your profile because we try to manage for that exact use case. Create 2 separate accounts using 2 emails, one for your nonprofit, one for your for-profit. It's your best way to do it. Farah was saying she has a registered business from the last 5 years and wants to hire employees and has a sustainable clothing line. I don't know where to get started. There's a couple of things, Farah. You can create your free account in Pocketed and start exploring on your own. We also do offer free office hour sessions twice a week where our team will walk you through how to use Pocketed and answer your own questions. If you're still feeling overwhelmed by it, that might be a good time and reason to spend the money and invest in a strategy session with a Pocketed grant specialist. They are not free. They do have a cost to them, but then you'll leave that with clarity on which funding programs should you be looking to pursue for your business. You'll leave with a funding roadmap that our team helps you build. So it might be worth the investment if you're finding yourself quite overwhelmed by it and not sure where to get started. We also have a ton of educational resources, Farah, so take advantage of those. Do social enterprises get grants as a for-profit? Jamie.
Yes. If your social enterprise is a for-profit, has for-profit status, then yes, you will be eligible to go after for-profit funding.
Yeah, awesome. As an early stage startup in prop tech or entertainment tech, are there grant opportunities available? Yes. And we're going to say the same thing we said about being a female-owned business or a counseling firm. What you're building has a lot less to do with what you can access than where you spend money to build it. So I would challenge you, Ade, to consider, how do I spend money to build those companies? And that'll make a big difference. The composition of where your founding team is located matters less than where your business is registered. That is what will predicate a lot of it for you. You do need to be, generally speaking, a Canadian-controlled private corporation, where the majority of your ownership is Canadian in order to access certain programs, but not all programs. And then Michael's question is, are there post-grant accountability and reporting processes and procedures for grant recipients? And if yes, what are they like? Whew, Michael, that is opening Pandora's box. I'm going to let Jamie take it.
It can be literally as easy as emailing pay stubs to get reimbursed for a hiring grant. It can be as complex as delivering enumerated page reports on the outcomes of your project. It really depends on the funder, the size of the award. So the bigger, right? Like the government is investing in you, right? They're taking our taxpayer dollars. If they're giving you millions of bucks, there's going to be pretty onerous reporting requirements. We've seen projects literally hire project managers because they got $20 million from the government and they need to make sure that it's administrated properly. But for entry-level grants, like hiring grants, like a $50,000 market expansion grant, it's really just filling in a few forms and submitting receipts for the most part. So don't get scared. Get started. Don't get scared.
I like that.
Good advice.
Awesome. And we did touch on the timeline question as well. So I think we're good.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Just in the nick of time too, Bontu.
Yeah.
Again, for anyone that is here and doesn't yet have an account, take advantage of the code that you're getting today through ATB. It will get you a free Pocketed account. And it's a great way to do what Jamie just said, which is get started. And ultimately, like anything in entrepreneurship and building your business, the right thing to do, the best thing for your business is rarely the easy thing. So yes, grants have complexity. Pocketed exists to help reduce that complexity, demystify it to some extent, and help you move forward faster with identifying the right programs and then getting those applications submitted, because you will never win money if you're not applying and taking the risk and making the effort. So you do need to get started. And for anyone that doesn't have the capacity or expertise or whatever it is to do it yourself, we get it. And that's why we do offer those services as well, in addition to the free software that you can access.
For sure. Amazing. And just before I pass it over to William to close us off for today, what's the best, like if they have questions, they've gone through Pocketed, but if they still have questions and want to actually talk to someone, what's the best way to for them to reach out to either of you or just a person that can like walk them through? I know you said you talked about like the office hours. So what's the best way to get access to that as well?
Yeah, for folks that aren't paying subscribers, you're limited to office hours and some email support. We do restrict human access to people that are paying subscribers. We have to, because we have over 15,000 companies that use Pocketed. And I saw that question asked, where are we located? We are literally across the country. We are a Canadian business. My co-founder and I are both in British Columbia. I'm in the Lower Mainland. She's up in the Okanagan. And our team is distributed coast to coast. I'm, again, West Coast. Jamie is over in Nova Scotia. So our team does go all across the country. And we've been in business since 2021. And since then have helped over 15,000 companies access more than $100 million in funding. So we have an awesome track record of success and are excited to be able to work alongside many of you as well to support your funding journeys.
Amazing. Awesome. Anything else to add, Jamie?
No, we're here to help. Best of luck on your entrepreneurial journeys. I mean, I think Briana said it well. You need to start learning about grants as soon as possible. But it doesn't mean you have to do all of your grants, right? You have to learn about marketing. You learn about bookkeeping. But the moment that you have the capacity to start spending on some fractional help for grant support, we're here to help you very much so. So best of luck on this learning journey. I hope to see some of you in office hours. And please know that we're a resource for you as you grow.
Yeah. Thanks for having us, Bontu, and the whole ATB team, William, everyone that made this happen. We are so grateful for all your work and your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, William, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing your expertise today. I think all of our business owners are leaving with valuable information and tools to help grow their businesses and a great understanding of the grant process. And thank you everyone for your participation in the chat today. As we wrap up, my colleague Laura has posted a link to our feedback survey in the chat, and we would appreciate it if you take a minute to respond to the survey before moving on with your day so we know what you thought of today's session. And remember to keep an eye out for an email within the next few days that's going to include some follow-up materials and a registration link for our upcoming events. Here's what we have coming over the next couple of weeks. On August 22nd, we're welcoming Alberta virtually to provide an introduction to social financing for entrepreneurs, and backed by popular demand, we're going to be joined by Tanya Woods Richardson from Nail the Numbers on September 5th for a virtual session to help you price for profit. Make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at atbentrepreneurscenter.com and to stay up to date on all of our events and receive relevant business articles. Have a great rest of your day, everyone, and see you soon.